CPR, also known as cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The goal here is to distribute oxygenated blood through the body, most importantly to the brain. Who can remember how many minutes it takes before the brain starts to die due to a lack of oxygen? 4 minutes. Right. So what you're actually doing when you're doing chest compressions on a person whose heart has stopped beating is you're actually distributing the blood for him throughout his body. And for that mission then is to make sure that the brain actually keeps on working. An adult, when we talk about CPR and first aid, is any individual above the age of 8. A child, this person here, would be the person from the ages 1 to 8. And an infant, anything below 1. Right. Now the main differences here between the different types of CPR for them. Adults, we use 2 hands. Children will only use 1 hand or 2 hands, depending on the size of the child. And an infant will use only 2 fingers. If we look at ventilations, that's when you're breathing for the person. For an adult, you will give the individual 2 full breaths. Child, you will give 2 half breaths. And for an infant, 2 light puffs. Now for adults and children, you would put your mouth on theirs, or you would use a mouthpiece to do that. If it's a family member, it doesn't matter, you can use your own mouth. But if it's a person that you don't know, you're obviously going to use a mouthpiece. You don't want to pick up something that you don't want to live with for the rest of your life, or you don't want to get sick. When doing the ventilations for a baby, you would place your mouth over the baby's mouth and nose at the same time. You actually get specialized mouthpieces for that actually covers this area. Right. Looking at the depth of compression, this is now how deep you push when you do the compressions on the individual. An adult, you would push 4 to 5 centimeters deep, irrespective of the size of the adult. Right. That should be enough pressure to actually pump the blood through the system. For a child, it's 1/4 of the chest width, but it's not this width. It's this width. Right? So you have to gauge it by just looking. You have to guess. So if the child's chest is this wide when lying on the ground, take 1/4 of that. That's how deep you'll push. And if it's a small chest cavity, you'll probably only use 1 hand. Infants is 1/4 to 1/3 of the chest width. Now 1/3 sounds like a lot, but it isn't. A baby's skeletal system, specifically the chest cavity, isn't brittle yet. As you grow up, this bone structure actually starts to harden. So when you're a baby, some of your bones can actually bend to a degree. The beats per minute, which is the amount of compressions you want to try and do in 1 minute. I'm saying try because you're probably not going to get there. It's a benchmark. If for an adult, you want to try and do 80 to 100 compressions in a minute. For a child, 100, and an infant, 120. So for an infant, that means you need to do 2 compressions per second. Again, you won't get there, but the idea is to kickstart the heart into beating by itself. You'll need to do 2 ventilations for 30 compressions. Now, once you've done 2 ventilations and 30 compressions, that equals 1 set. 5 sets equals a cycle. After a cycle, you need to stop and check the ABCs, look for a pulse, see if the person's breathing, and then you restart. You do not stop CPR unless you see signs of life, unless the person wakes up, or unless you are instructed to, or, in the worst case scenario, you're too tired. You can't carry on.